So it's interesting you bring up Tiger Woods because let's ask ourselves a question there. Did it really work out?
Yeah.
Look at how much mental health he struggled with. Look at what ended up happening because of that pressure to perform.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Home Service Hustle. I'm your host, Jonathan Bannister, and today's guest is Robby D'Angelo. Guys, we talk about marketing, mindset, and money, and this guy right here is going to talk about all of them, and you don't want to miss it. When we talk about mindset, there's almost no one better, maybe Tony Robbins in the business, guys. You don't want to hear the advice that he is getting ready to give us to grow and to become a better version of us tomorrow, all right? Don't miss it. Welcome to the show, Robby D'Angelo. All right, guys, so I want to welcome Robby D'Angelo to the show. Robby, thank you for joining us today. We've got some really awesome things that we're going to cover and we're going to be talking about. So let's start with your childhood, right? Let's go into...
Going way back.
Yeah, way back, right? So let's talk about, when did you honestly take a look and decide that maybe there was some struggles there with your weight? And I understand you're going to kind of talk about what you kept telling yourself. You were in denial for a little bit and kind of made you okay with what was going on because of football and whatever. But when do you think you looked at yourself or maybe compared yourself to some of your family members, because all y'all were very athletic and maybe you were shaped a little differently? So talk a little bit about that.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I think that so much of what I dealt with, you bring up my weight, yes. For those of you listening, I grew up obese my entire adolescence and continued in my early 20s. But what you just brought up was one of the biggest things that I struggled with. My weight wasn't really something I looked at as a problem, more than I was always comparing myself to my older brother. Jonathan knows my older brother. They used to play golf together. But my older brother was one of those gifted athletes that no matter what he touched turned to gold. Just one of the best golfers in the Southeast, phenomenal football player. And here I was, the fat little brother that was always comparing myself. So what I say is, like, a lot of the mental health struggles that I dealt with as a young kid, it wasn't something my parents put on me. It wasn't something that my older brother necessarily put on me. Of course, like he picked on me like brothers do, but most of what I dealt with as a kid was simply my own comparison to what he was doing versus what I was doing, and that actually just totally diminished my self-worth. And that's where most of my insecurities, I would say that's probably the seed that was planted as to why I've developed a lot of insecurities growing up.
So it's interesting that, you mentioned about, I guess, kind of living in your brother's shadow, right? Like you had someone that you were always trying to be like older brother, be like Mickey. I'm the youngest of three boys, so I always had older brothers that I was, trying to compare myself to. So tell me about when you kind of accepted it, like when football kind of started taking off for you and you didn't have to worry about, that you kind of had some of your own special, things that maybe you got out of your brother's, shadow a little bit.
So that's the crazy part for me. That didn't happen until my late 20s. Even when I was having football success, when I was, even when I was in high school, I was rated number 2 player in the country at my position. I was a high school All-American. Even though I was having this success, I couldn't see it because I was so busy in comparison mode where, even though I'm, an offensive lineman and seeing all this success, well, I'm not the quarterback. I'm not getting the front page of the headlines. I'm not getting all the girls. I'm not getting all the accolades. I'm still an offensive lineman. So I still wasn't feeling that. And even when I did get the recognition, the comparison was so bad I never saw it. It wasn't until my late 20s when I discovered who I really was that I was able to step into my own power and realize, like, man, you really do have a lot going on.
So before we get to the late 20s, let's go into college, right? So you had a successful high school career. You played college football at University of Southern Mississippi. I'm sure you had some very exciting times, playing college football, right? You talked to me, and I would love for you to talk a little bit about, you had multiple injuries. There came a time that you realized that, probably every game you played, you knew that you were getting closer and closer to the end. You knew that there wasn't going to be an NFL career for you because of all the injuries that you had sustained. So what were you thinking? I know that, you finished your last game, 2006?
It was 2006, correct.
Yeah, and then you went ahead and stayed in school, got your graduate degree in 2007. I mean, I think that's super awesome that you were even able to, back then keep your mind focused enough that you wanted to, finish school, even though really what had been your whole life up to that point had kind of been football, and you knew that it was over essentially, and you didn't have, I'm sure you had some dreams and aspirations of things that you wanted to go do, but you probably hadn't positioned yourself all that great to worry about life after football, right? I mean, it was kind of day in and day out was the practices, and that's just kind of what you live for, right?
Oh, 100%. When I was playing college football, I wasn't there. I mean, I changed my major like 3 or 4 times, and I was general studies forever. Like, I had no clear path as to what I was going to do, nor did I really have any ambitions or dreams of what I was going to do post-football. And I also realized probably my junior year, going into my junior year, I was projected high on the draft boards. I was looked at as one of the best centers in the country. Like, I was once again receiving all these accolades for my athletic performance. But what was crazy was, looking back, I didn't really feel any of that, and I didn't recognize that, oh my goodness, I'm actually having success, because once again, I'm still comparing myself to other people, and I'm still comparing myself to my brother, and I was so busy comparing myself and just struggling with so many mental health issues. I'll be honest, man, during my college football career, there's a lot of it I don't even remember. I'm sure some of your audience has heard this word, compartmentalizing. I was super good at compartmentalizing everything in my life. And a lot of my college career, man, it's a blur. People ask me about specific games and specific situations. I'm like, okay, I remember that, but I remember no details of it. Why? Because it was painful. I was struggling with anxiety and depression. I was struggling with the weight issue. I had so much going on. And it's funny you bring up the thing about grad school. The only reason I went to grad school, there's 2 reasons. A, was my older brother went to grad school. So I'm like, screw that. If he can do it, I can do it too. And then the second reason I went to grad school was because I had no clue what I wanted to do in life. So I'm like, you know what? If I can get a graduate assistant spot and make a little bit of money, then I can pay for this while I'm in grad school, and I can have a master's degree for pretty much free once I leave. So I'm going to go do that just because I have no clue what I want to do for a living. I'm actually working with a ton of college students right now, and you'd be surprised how much clarity they need to develop when they're in school, because they're struggling with the same thing.
So you mentioned something that I feel that there's probably a lot of listeners, today of this podcast, they're probably, I would say that the typical person that's listening today is going to be, a middle-aged business owner. All of them probably have kids similar to the age that you were going through the same thing. So I think that you're probably speaking to a lot of people that are struggling with their own children going through something very similar to this. What advice would you give to anyone listening today that may themselves or one of their children that could be struggling with some type of mental health? I mean, it could be array of things, right? But what kind of advice would you give them today if they were going to, for themselves, or walk into the room to talk to their kids and say, look, you could do this today to maybe make a mental shift to help what you're kind of going through?
I would say it's 2 things. A lot of what I dealt with growing up, I'm actually seeing, because I'm on the executive board of the Mental Health Association. So I'm actually seeing this, and it kind of gives me some of that you're not alone feeling. A lot of kids that struggle with mental health, they're not being seen and heard. And you and I can probably relate to this. While I don't have kids, I can see where this would be a problem. We get so busy with running our business and paying bills and what I call with my clients like drowning in priorities of life. We get so busy with that, and we think that we're doing the right thing because we're bringing home a paycheck and we're providing for our family, that we forget like why we're doing that in the first place. So when it comes to like kids especially, you'd be surprised what just deeply listening to your kids would do for them, and actually hearing them out and not judging them for it. And then on the other side of that, showing them the truth, which is that you unconditionally love them. I don't need you to be an all-American so I'll love you. I don't need you to make an A for me to love you. Yes, I would love for you to do all those things, but my love is coming at you unconditionally. I would say that's the two biggest things, even in the schools I've worked with, kids want to be seen and heard, and then they want to be shown unconditional love.
Yeah, and so let's talk about that for a minute. Where do you think, like me personally, I think I can see where parents would get lost in maybe living through their children, like something that they missed out on their childhood. Yes. So when they get so caught up and they're the crazy soccer mom or the crazy football parents, it's like, yeah, they love their kids and they want to see them be, have this super successful, youth sports career. But you see some of them get so crazy and out of control. I sit and think, I'm like, they had to, they either wanted to play football and their parents couldn't afford it or wouldn't let them or something got taken away from them that they're trying to live through their children. But, you look at, like the Tiger Woods story, right? And it obviously it worked out for him, but to push your kids to that level, like I don't think it can be healthy, especially for, mental health today and what it looked like 20, 30 years ago before technology got completely out of control. I think that's something that parents really need to watch. I mean, what is your take there?
So it's interesting you bring up Tiger Woods, because let's ask ourselves a question there. Did it really work out?
Yeah.
Look at how much mental health he struggled with. Look at what ended up happening because of that pressure to perform. The guy almost became a Navy SEAL at one point. During his, mental health problems, and then he got addicted to pills. So ask yourself that question, like, is that truly what success looks like? And you bring up a really good point about like parenting, and really it's our relationship with anybody, and it's always that question, like, is this really what I want for them, or is this something I'm projecting on them? And I had to come to this realization with my own parents. My parents are incredibly loving, amazing people, but they also had that pressure to perform mentality because they were athletes. I mean, hell, my mom's in the Tulane Basketball Hall of Fame. My dad's a really, successful football coach. And what I had to realize was underneath that pressure, underneath all the things that they wanted me to do, it was the reasons why they wanted me to do them. So as a parent, that's what you got to look at is, why do I want this for my kid? Do I really want them to be a football All-American, or do I just want them to be happy? Because most of the projections that parents put on kids, yes, it can be from the voids that weren't met in their own life, but a lot of times parents love their kids unconditionally and don't quite know how to express it. They don't quite know how to translate that to their kids, so they think it's money, they think it's a career, they think it's athletics, they think it's all these things, when in actuality they just want their kids to be happy and successful in whatever way, shape, or form that takes.
So let's go into you struggled with obesity as a child. You continue to run in the whole family's footsteps with football. Once you decided that your stature and the weight that you carried around was going to be great for certain positions in football, and obviously, like you said, you became the number 2 in the state at that position. So that probably triggered your mind to say, like, the bigger I am, the stronger I'm going to be, and the better I'm going to be at this position. So you probably never hesitated to eat and do whatever you want to do, even though there was probably a side of you that felt like it's a little out of control. It's probably not healthy. So walk me through what was your diet like back in those days? Let's say during football, what was your diet like? And then obviously I want to pivot and go to what happened, life after 2007. So let's talk about what was your diet like in football?
10,000 calories a day.
Wow.
I was on that Michael Phelps diet for sure. Every morning I would get up and drink a 2,500 calorie protein shake just to start my day. And that's more calories than most people should consume in an entire day. But I was eating that just for breakfast. And the way I relate it to people so they understand is imagine this. Imagine, like, we've all been there. We've all, like, gone to a buffet or we've gone to a restaurant and we've put ourselves in a food coma where we're just like, oh, I just want to go home and sleep. That after Thanksgiving feeling that you have. Imagine feeling like that 4 to 5 times a day, but still being asked to perform at a high athletic level. Like, it was just this duality that I was living in, and it was tough, man. It was tough to, like, always be tired, always be lethargic, because I wasn't eating the right foods. No one ever teaches us proper nutrition. No one ever teaches us eat this, not that. So I was eating pizza, just like whatever I could find to get that many calories in, and I was feeling like crap because of it.
So yeah, so I was going to ask the question right before you just said it. You would think, most people, I think most of the listeners here would think that if you're playing at that level, right? Like you're playing college football, you would think that there would be nutritionists on staff that is watching what you're eating and how you're eating and making sure that you're getting, the at peak performance for these games and practices. So was that not the case?
It's getting a lot better. And this is something a lot of people don't think about. At your top, 25 teams in the country, yes. Like, I've been to Alabama's facilities, and it's unbelievably tailored to the athlete as far as eat this, eat this, eat this. This is what's going to help you perform. But most schools can't afford that. Most schools can't afford, like, the nutritionists and the perfectly designed meals for the athletes. And it's hard to compete at that point. So yeah, when we were playing, look, we would eat 2 fried Chick-fil-A sandwiches every night for a game. And like, that blows my mind to think about now, eating fried chicken the night for a football game. And look, don't get me wrong, I never turned it down.
Who's going to turn down Chick-fil-A
right?
sandwich, right?
That's what I'm saying. But that's what we were eating the night before the game, just because there was that education there. We couldn't afford a full-time nutritionist at the school.
Right. So that's going to lead me to some questions here in a little bit. So I want to circle back around to kind of what Mickey's doing today, maybe what you're doing today for the youth because of things that maybe weren't available to you guys or things that you've now since learned. Like, wow, if we would have been taught this in junior high and high school, who knows what it would have done for the rest of my career, maybe not had as many injuries, whatever it may be. So let's touch on that here in a minute. Let's talk about what happened when you left school in 2007. I know you and I have talked. You said, I wanted to go and do the things that, that I was supposed to do, right? Like I was supposed to go and find the wife and get this, great career and start my life. And then how that spiraled you completely out of control to the place where you wanted to be dead and, thought about suicide. So talk a little bit about what happened when you left school.
Yeah, so my year of grad school, I lost 105 pounds. I was done with school. I had way too many injuries to even think about the pros. By this point, I'd already had 4 of my 6 knee surgeries that I've had now. And my medical chart is so thick. Our trainer used to joke with me, but he's going to name the training room after me. I was in there so much. So I knew, like, the pros was out of the question. So I'm like, okay, bro, like, you no longer need the weight. The weight has, in my head at the time, been the number one problem in my life, so let's lose the weight. And I just focused on 2 pounds a week. I lost 105 pounds in a year. But what happened, looking back, was I lost the physical weight, but I didn't solve one mental issue that I was dealing with. So I lose the weight, and then I, start living my adult life. I started adulting. And my definition was adulting. My definition of adulting was the American dream, right? Like, you're supposed to get a good career, you're supposed to find a wife, you're supposed to settle down, blah, blah, blah. So I was on that trajectory. And about 6 years after 5 to 6 years after I'd finished playing ball and got out of grad school, I was living that trajectory. I'd had a good business. I had met the girl of my dreams at the time, and we were buying a house together. Like, we were doing all the things. So within the course of a 3-month period, my American dream totally came crashing down, and here's how. I found out my business partner was stealing money from me, so he left me dead broke. My fiance and I called it quits because it was a horribly toxic relationship. And then the apartment I was living in at the time got broke into, and everything on it got stolen. So all that happened within 3 months. And for me, it was the first time in my life where I had to come to grips with a story in my head of, you're a failure. Like, that's literally what I kept telling myself in my head, was you tried this American dream and you failed. So I was 29 years old at the time, and I had to move back in with my dad to get back on my feet. And oh man, that's tough when you're 29 and when you've been living on your own really since you're 18, and like you're dealing with all these other factors of being broke, having to get another job that I hated, and then like going through a breakup at the same time. So at that point, like, I fell into a deep dark depression, just because I'd had this tragedy, like series of events in my life, and I didn't know how to deal with it. No one ever teaches us like anything about emotional fitness or how to overcome tragedy in our life. So I just went into depression, and I found a job to make money that I absolutely hated, but I was able to make money and start like rebuilding my life. I was still dealing with the breakup. So there was a course of about 9 months where literally I'd work 70, 80 hours a week, come home, watch TV, and go to sleep just because of the depression. I was turning away all my friends. I didn't want to see anybody. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I was just going through the motions at that point in my life. And there was a couple times during that period where I was ready to just call it quits. I mean, I'm like, go ahead.
Was that, you were selling cars, correct?
Yeah.
All right. And then you had told me, though, now looking back, and you probably knew it at the time, you hated it, but you started, you felt like a failure. Your business partner took all your money. You lost, what you thought was the girl of your dreams at the time, which later you now realize it was a toxic relationship, and obviously it was for the best. Mm-hmm. But in that moment, whenever you were doing this job that you hated and doing 78 hours a week, you said you started to have a little bit of success, and got some of those highs because you, I guess, were maybe coming out of that feeling like such a failure. But then you told me there was a moment that you had just had one of your best weeks or best months yet, and then tell us what happened.
So yeah, I mean, well, I don't like call myself a natural salesman. I was having success selling cars. I think I made, in that course of like 9 months, I'd made like, right at like 80 grand, something like that. So I was getting back on my feet. I was paying off some debt. I was able to become debt free during that time. And yeah, I was having some success there, but honestly, the cloud of depression wasn't allowing me to see it. And what happened, the moment you're referring to, was in the car business. It's called a hat trick. You sell 3 cars in one day. I sold 3 cars one Saturday and made like 6 grand. And like, I'm like, okay, maybe life isn't so bad. So I get home after work and I pull out my phone and I'm like, you know what? I want to go like celebrate with some friends tonight. And I started looking through my phone and I realized I don't have any friends anymore. I text a couple people. I tried calling a couple people, but they were busy or out with their wives or whatever. And like, it hurt me so bad, because when you really look at the research, which we don't need to talk about right now, but relationships are the most important thing in your life. And it's honestly the reason most people do the things they do in their life, is because relationships. So at that moment, it hit me like I didn't have any relationships. I didn't even like really talk to my parents because of the depression. So after I like looked at my phone and realized like I'm alone, man, it like destroyed me. Probably like the worst I'd felt during this whole period of depression, to the point where, because of all the surgeries I've had, because of all the athletic injuries I've had, I went to my bathroom and grabbed a full bottle of Lortabs. And I'm like, you know what? This is probably the best way for me to go because I'll just go to sleep and I won't wake up. And I went to my bedroom, grabbed a drink, went to my bedroom, and I'm sitting here like staring at this bottle of pills, and I'm ready to call it quits. But it kind of hit me at that moment. It's like, you've done a lot in this world. Like you've actually, you were a 2-time All-American. You've traveled, you've created successful businesses. You're obviously good at what you're doing now. You've had some amazing friendships. You're probably just in a really tough season, and I had tough seasons in football, so I could kind of relate it to that. And it hit me in my head like, man, you're meant for more. Like this is not what your life is supposed to look like. Your life is not supposed to look like 70, 80 hours a week and you sleeping your life away. There's probably something for you to create. There's probably something for you to do. You just need to go find it. And like that thought of getting to the end of my life and realizing I had wasted that the gifts that were placed inside of me, like that scared me. It scared me to the point where like, okay, you've got to do something about this.
It's not my intention to keep talking about you and the brothers story here, but I think the more I think about it, it makes me feel that there's a lot of people out there today. Like I think of my own children, so it's like I've got one that's got the middle child syndrome, and it scares me to death that he's always going to be looking down at his baby brother or looking up to his older brother. And how does someone take, you're sitting there with the bottle of pills in your hand and you make the decision that I'm meant for more in this world, but what can you tell someone now that you are a mindset coach and you are helping, hundreds of people in your journey, but what could you give someone right now advice that's maybe thinking those same thoughts that I'm a failure, and they look around, whether it's a uncle, a brother, a dad, a sister, a brother, just someone that's always got this spotlight shining on them and they're struggling really bad. Like, what do you suggest for them? Because I want to talk here in a minute, because you mentioned something to me recently about mental diet and human capital, right? But like, you didn't understand and know these things until you started on this journey. But what can you tell someone right now to help them come to that realization like you did, that you're meant for so much more?
It's really a perspective shift. And we've all heard the saying, like, comparison is a thief of joy. And it's so true. The beautiful thing about life is I truly believe that each one of us are placed on this earth to learn our own medicine so we can heal others. And what I mean by that is we all have a gift inside of us. We all have something that we can have to help other people. And what's beautiful about that is sometimes we have to go through the crap to realize that. Sometimes we have to go through the struggle to realize that, but it's during those dark times that you appreciate the light. And really it's discovering that. And a lot of times, see, that's really the problem, is we're never taught how to discover our gifts. We're never taught how to truly unleash our power onto the world, because we're trained as robots to go get the job, to go do this, and to live the American dream. But understanding what you're truly capable of is really a product of pushing against your own capacity to do amazing things. And there's so many ways you could do that, from athletics to business. But that person that's struggling, the thing that I always tell people that are stuck, that are struggling like that, is what's something you could do right now to create a win in your life? And I want you to look for the smallest possible thing you can find, the smallest possible thing that you have 100% control over. What is that thing? And then go do it. Don't hesitate. Go do it, and then celebrate the crap out of your ability to go do that.
And how small can that be? Like, give some examples, because you mentioned some the other day, and I was like, wow, because you started saying it can be so small, but as you just continue to do them, it adds up and builds up and becomes this where you have extreme confidence of these little tiny things that you've done. So give some examples of things that people, that have full control of something they could go do themselves.
Well, look at the area of life you feel stuck in. Like, what is that defeating thought that you have in your life? Now let's create a win in that category. So if it's your health, I'm really struggling with my health. Well, make a goal, like go drink some water right now. Go drink water right now, and then say, okay, that's step one. Now let me go do something else. If like your sales numbers are struggling, who can I call right now? Who can I send an email to right now? Like, it's literally that small. It's not, I need to go make $10,000 in sales, or I need to make $100,000 or whatever. No, it's what email can I send right now to a prospective client? And then the thing is about that is you're not celebrating the result of that. You're celebrating your action. You're celebrating the fact that you just made a promise to yourself and you kept it. And that's really where confidence comes in, is in personal integrity. Your ability to keep promises you make to yourself. That's why I encourage you to start with the smallest thing you can think of. Look, guys, it could be as simple as you waking up without hitting the snooze button because you promised yourself you would wake up on time. You do that for a week, watch how much better you feel in the mornings because you kept that promise you made to yourself, and you're reaffirming that you're actually stronger than the emotions they're telling you stay in bed.
Yep. All right, so this is a great opportunity to go into the topic that I'm excited about, the transformation. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned to me recently that during your transformation, whenever that mind shift took place, and I want you to tell the story here, but you said that you started making those little promises to yourself, and it was about going to the gym, and you told me something that it stuck with me, and I find extremely fascinating and funny, but you kept that promise. And it was someday you said, I'm going to go to the gym every single day, and that you didn't even care if you did not work out, as long as you set foot and opened the door to go inside the gym. So let's talk about the transformation, when it happened, why it happened, and then obviously, I don't know if you were thinking that you would one day be competing in, bodybuilding shows and things like that, especially at being, what were you at your heaviest weight?
308.
308. So, obviously when you started this journey, you probably could have never imagined that the fat kid at 308 who was an offensive lineman was going to be, in, these physique shows and things like that moving forward. So let's talk about the transformation.
So from that decision I made when I was laying in bed with that thing of lower tabs, I'm like, okay, I pretty much asked myself the same question. What's something I can do to get back on track? Like, what's something I can do to just start moving forward? Because I needed forward momentum. I'm like, you know what? You've always found refuge in the gym. That's always been a really good outlet for you. So like you just referred to, I made a commitment to myself to just show up at the gym every day. And I was working the crazy hours in the car a lot, so I had to go before the gym every day. I had to go before work every day. So it was like 6 o'clock in the morning, I was in the gym. And like what happened was, because I showed up every day consistently, and guys, I'll be honest, like some days I literally would walk in, I would walk around, and then walk back out. Some days I would walk in, I'd sit on the equipment, it's like just go through the motions just to do something. But what happened was, when I kept that commitment to myself, eventually I'm like, okay, bro, like if you're showing up, let's do something. Because I started to have a little more confidence in that personal integrity, in that ability for me to keep my word to myself. So my confidence was at a 0 when I started, but was inching up to a 1. And from there, I'm like, okay, let's start working out again. Like, okay, I went on YouTube, guys. There's an amazing resource called YouTube, and I downloaded a workout from YouTube, and I started just following that plan. And then from there, I'm like, oh man, okay, I'm feeling good again. Because I had gained 40 pounds in depression, and that was just terrible for my mental state. So I'm like, all right, well, now we're working out again. Let's start eating healthy. Yeah, we know how to eat healthy. Let's start doing that again. And I'll be honest, it was not pretty at first. I would eat 3 healthy meals, then go have pizza. But slowly, once again, I'm keeping those promises that I'm making to myself. I'm drinking water again. I started what's called habit stacking. And habit stacking is a beautiful thing. So basically, I created the first habit of showing up at the gym. And then from there, I started having good workouts at the gym. And then once I'm like, okay, this is cool. Now I'm like, okay, let's stack another habit on that. Now let's start eating healthy. Now let's start drinking water. Now let's start going to sleep on time. But you got to get that first habit down before you start stacking the other ones. And I started building this confidence in myself. And what was crazy, guys, was like even during my health transformation, I'm like, oh man, okay. Now let me start listening to something positive. So I was working on my physical self. Now I started working on my mental self because I started feeling good again. I started feeling more confident, more energized. So I started listening to like old school Tony Robbins, Awaken the Giant Within. And I started listening to Les Brown, who I love. And once again, I just stumbled across these people because I was watching workout videos on YouTube. YouTube's a savior in my life. It still is. But I started listening to positive things. And what was crazy was about 6 months after this habit stacking journey of working on my physical and my mental diet, I was leaving work because I'd had enough confidence to get a new job at this point. And I went and like literally sat down for like a 5-hour interview and said, I want this job, and I got it. I was driving home one day in my company car, and I was listening to a comedy station on XM radio. And keep in mind, like, I'm just out of like a deep, deep, dark depression where I don't even think I knew how to smile at this time in my life. But I'm driving home, and I find myself, like, as I'm pulling into my neighborhood, laughing out loud. Like, in my car by myself, I'm laughing out loud. And like, I took a moment because of like all the personal growth I was going through. I took a moment to like sat back. I'm like, man, this feels good. Like, it feels good to freaking laugh. I almost didn't even remember what laughing felt like. And I made a commitment to that day. I'm like, you're not allowed to ever lose this version of yourself. This version of yourself that's seeking growth, seeking new opportunities, seeking expansion, and loving yourself. Like, you're not allowed to ever lose this guy again.
I love the habit stacking. I mean, I think a lot of people, myself included, you start critiquing yourself and really beating yourself up, and then when you start to put a plan together to go like, I need to change this and this about myself in order to be successful, or in order to be the best husband or best father, whatever that may be, you start getting overwhelmed and like, where do I start, right? And I think I really, really love that advice of doing the little small things, letting them add up. And when you're celebrating, you're not celebrating the success over sending an email to someone or dropping a call to someone, but you're celebrating that you're actually following through with what the promise that you made yourself. And those little promises will add up, and then you can start doing that habit stacking, and before long, like, you will transform the person that you were, and you could look back 6 months or a year later and go, I don't know who that guy was or who that girl was, because like, why can't I get up and go to the gym, or why can't I eat this, healthy lifestyle, or why can't I just send these emails like I do now, but I had such a hard time doing it before. So I really like that advice. So I noticed, and I've never asked you this before, but I'll notice that a few years ago, it looked like Mickey actually went through some transformation of his own. And he's always, I think, had that physique body, right, where he didn't really struggle maybe with his weight. But I think once his football career was over, he looks completely different now. So I was curious, was that, did that have something to do with your journey, and did y'all do anything together to kind of, work on that?
So there's an old saying that is really, really true, and it's made fun of a lot. Breakups make bodybuilders. And it was really after he went through his divorce with his wife. He went on his own journey of self-discovery. He went on his own journey of growth. And actually, when he was going through that, I had already been on mine. So yeah, he was asking me a ton of diet questions. He was asking me a ton of workout questions. And it was really cool to watch him rebuild himself. And anytime, it's actually, we've all heard the term PTSD, but a term a lot of people don't throw around is post-traumatic growth, which is honestly, if you're in the right mindset, is one of the most powerful things you'll ever go through. And watching him go through post-traumatic growth as someone who works in the space was a beautiful thing to witness.
Well, one thing I told you I wanted to circle back around was, what has this journey for you, talking about Mickey and some of his self growth, and obviously he had his own adversity, with his divorce and things like that. He is still in sports today, right? He's coaching high school football, right? So, and I'm sure that though you have your own business and career now, and we want to talk about that next, I'm sure you also have something to do with young people today.
I do. I actually have a nonprofit that it's called Rise Up, and really, like, looking back at my own childhood and working in this industry now, I realize like how important mental health is, especially at the younger ages. So my nonprofit is centered around like teaching mental health, and actually I teach mental health to the professionals so they can then let it trickle down to the students. And I've done a lot of programs with teachers. I've gotten teachers mental health first aid certified, so they can actually handle kids that are having panic attacks in the classroom and different episodes in the classroom. But it's just something extremely near and dear to my heart, because I know what I went through. I know what I struggled with. So if I can give educators and administrators resources to help our youth really learn some emotional fitness, then we can actually start making a difference and preventing, having to be 40 years old and having a mental breakdown and then having to go through all the struggles because we learned how to deal with it at an early age.
One thing that we haven't touched on yet, and that I want to ask is, obviously, you can now say today that you had an addiction, right? Like you were addicted to food. You've told me that it is still something that is extremely difficult for you because, and not to take anything away from any other kind of addiction, but it's something that you said, and I thought was super interesting because I've never looked at it this way before, is because it's something that you have to consume every single day. Like you have to keep eating or you will die, but it's having to have that self-control to make sure that you're eating the right stuff, or it could quickly, to think about how easy that relapse could be because every day you're consuming the thing that you struggle with. Talk a little bit about that, and what does it look like when you were in maybe at 308 and trying to lose the first 2 pounds a day, and then kind of what is that like for you today? Because everybody's going to look at you and go, like, you're chiseled out of stone, you have no issues, like you eat perfectly, but it probably is not as easy as it looks.
No, the thing I say is, while food is not as deadly as some of the other substances that we become addicted to, it's one of the toughest addictions to fully break because it's the only addiction you can't practice abstinence. You can stop drinking alcohol, you can stop, shooting heroin in your arm, but you can't stop eating. While yes, those other substances are far worse for you than food, but when we look at just the addiction process, it's a tough addiction to break. And with any addictions never really go away. There's some neurochemical processes that happen in the brain where your brain becomes hardwired for that addiction, and that's what happened with me. My addiction is emotional eating. So when I become stressed out, when I have something negative happen in my life, my first reaction is I want a pizza. I don't want just like a little thing of Ben & Jerry's. I want 5 of them. And yeah, when I was 308 pounds, I was able to justify that with, I need to eat this way for football. So I was justifying my addiction, even though it was completely unhealthy, and even though it led me to having some health problems. But when I first started trying to break that addiction, man, it was tough. I would eat healthy 90% of the time, and then I would binge. I'm like, okay, bro, you feel guilty, like this is terrible, you're beating yourself up. Start eating healthy again, and then I would binge again. And the binge like never came at a happy time. I never like celebrated with food. It was always, this girl rejected me. Let me go drown my sorrows in food. And it's tough. So really what I had to do is I had to develop a trigger mindset shift for when the addiction came up, when that feeling of oh man, like I just want pizza, like and literally I would get like almost a panic attack level of anxiety when I didn't feed my addiction. And it was so crazy. Looking back at how much that food addiction caused me to literally, I had a couple panic attacks because I didn't feed my addiction. But what shifted for me was when I started asking myself this question. I would literally have to like stop, like, whoa, okay, you're just having an addiction moment right now. I called it out, but then I would ask myself this question: is this decision going to get you closer to your goals or going to get you further away from your goals? And what that did was it was able to put me back into the present now, but it also reframed my thought process on my goals. Like, this food that you want to consume is actually going to hurt you, man. And you're going to feel like crap tomorrow, and you're going to be guilty, and you're tired of feeling like that, aren't you? Yeah, you are. So let's make a better decision so tomorrow you'll be thankful you did, and actually you'll start moving closer to your goals.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. What would you call that? Just a little self-awareness tip that you could ask yourself right before you're going to make possibly a bad decision. So you say, is this going to help me get closer to my goal, further away from it? I mean, how important are goals for anyone and everyone's just their everyday life?
Well, how do you go anywhere if you don't know where you're going? That's the first thing I do with any client that I sit down with is we get really, really crystal clear on what exactly do you want. I hear your surface level goals, but let's get real for a minute. When you're on your deathbed and you're telling the story of your life, what do you want that story to be? And when you clearly know kind of that end of life vision that you have for yourself, then you're able to reverse engineer that down to some very, very micro goals that we can then attack with a sense of urgency. But yeah, I mean, it's very simple. Like, if you don't know where you're going, how the hell are you going to get there?
That's right. So let's talk about that. We're getting towards the end here. So I do want to talk about where is Robby D'Angelo today, both as a man and as a career. Let's talk about what your business looks like. Because obviously, I know that a lot of my listeners today, that having some kind of mindset coach and business coach like yourself will be just huge for them. So let's talk about what you're doing today and how people that are listening could reach out to you and possibly use your services.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now I work in human capital inside of businesses, really getting teams and employers to really communicate properly so we can all optimize and work efficiently and effectively. So I take my business of one-on-one coaching, I do that in human capital inside of business, but my real passion is in what I call mental optimization. And really it's a holistic approach. What I talk about, you heard me say, just like getting crystal clear on your goals. But then, like, let's develop a plan and let's work through your limiting beliefs and that self-sabotaging patterns that you have. Like, let's really make sure that you're progressing towards those goals. And a lot of times what I find with my clients that I work with, and I work with some unbelievable high achievers, from UFC fighters, pro athletes, special ops guys, crazy good entrepreneurs. It's fun working with people who make a lot more money than you do. But, I work with these people, and what I find a lot of times is they don't know what they don't know. And it's such a beautiful process to opening someone's eyes and showing them a different perspective of seeing the world, because it's often, like, a lot of people say, you look in the mirror and that's what's holding you back, like it's you versus you. But I challenge that thought by saying it's often what you don't see in the mirror that's holding you back. It's those unseen limiting beliefs. It's some of those subconscious programs that we have to overcome that are really, once again, like we talked about earlier, they're holding back our gifts and our power. That, so many of my clients, what happens is they start realizing how powerful they are, and they start realizing how many gifts they have inside of them and really what they can accomplish just by upgrading the mental operating system.
So what is a tip that you could give someone right now that wants to work on that mental operating system? Like, how do they put the first step forward to start making some real change in their life? Because like you mentioned, they can look in the mirror and let's say they're looking at someone that they feel has success, like from the outside, as someone looks at it, they have success. They're a good looking person. But like you said, it's the stuff that you can't see in the mirror that may be holding them back. So what is some advice for those people that are still struggling, even though from the shell on the outside, everything looks great?
Yeah. So you don't know what you don't know. And what I always start with, and you brought it up earlier, and I'm glad we're able to circle back to this now, is your mental diet. And when I refer to your mental diet, guys, it's the same thing as your physical diet. Like literally, you are the product of what you eat, correct? So the same thing works for your mental operating system. In a computer, the software you install into a computer is what you then use to get out of it. Your brain works the same way, and you have to look at your mental diet and say, how much negativity am I consuming? How much toxic, relationships am I in? What am I really feeding myself to grow? Am I reading the books? Am I listening to the podcasts? Or am I always watching, Squid Game or just something? I couldn't watch that. Are we watching murder mysteries? Or are we watching like things that are depressing us and lowering our vibration? Or are we feeding our mind just these things that are empowering us? One of my favorite books is As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, and he talks about your mind being a garden. Are you pulling out the weeds that are keeping the flowers from blooming? And a lot of that comes from just learning more about personal growth, more about mindset. Carol Dweck's book Mindset just talks about being in that growth mindset. That's such a strong paradigm shift to have. So it's really, and the cool thing about this process is, I was telling someone the other day, the more I learn and the better I get, there's something called the paradox of potential. And this is such a powerful guiding light in my life, is the better I get, the more I realize how much potential I have. And the more I get closer to my potential moves with that growth. And that's exciting. It's exciting to really think about, what's possible if I'm pushing against my capacity every day. But it really starts with that growth mindset.
I love the growth mindset. I love the mental diet. I think that is one thing that is not talked about enough, especially with today's age and mental health being more and more on the horizon, and people are talking about it more and more. Where we know mental illness has been around forever, but it just wasn't talked about as much as it nearly is today. And I see people like at the gym every single morning, and they're on the treadmill, they're on the elliptical, and they've got Fox News or CNN, they've got something extremely negative in their face while they're at the gym. And I'm like, wow, after talking to you a little bit about it, I'm like, man, it's got to be like an oxymoron or something. Like, here you are there to get healthy and to feel good, and have this great day, but you're consuming your mind with the most toxic, awful, stuff that you could possibly put in it. And so I've really, taken that and taken a step back and said, what am I consuming each and every day? Because it's not just for my business, but I mean, it's how I'm going to approach my wife. It's how I'm going to approach my kids when they come home from school. Because if I've taken in a bunch of toxic, information, like, it's got to come out at some point, and it's probably going to come out in my attitude towards the people that are around me.
Yeah, I mean, look, in business, how many times do we do audits in business, right? We look at our books, we look at our inventory, and we're always auditing our business to see how we can improve things. What if you did that same audit process on your mental diet? And you pull out your phone and you look at your schedule and you look at all the times during the day that you consume something positive versus how many times during the day you consume something negative. And you audit that process, because here's a stat. Negative information your brain perceives as being 7 times more powerful than positive information. So in your mental diet, you actually have to consume 8 times more positivity than you consume negativity for it to then work. And what makes that stat even crazier is when we're consuming negative content, if we then speak it, so we repeat something negative or we verbalize a negative thought, we then give it a power of 10. So as we're gossiping and as we're talking about negativity, we're actually telling our brain, this is 70 times more powerful than that positivity you just consumed. That's why your mental diet is so important.
Wow, that's something that I hope every one of you out there that's listening to this, if you don't take away anything from this podcast, really chew on that a little bit and think about, because I don't think that's something that anyone really takes a second thought at. They feel that if they see something negative on Facebook but then they see these little cute puppies doing something sweet that makes them smile, that it's the same reaction to your brain and the chemicals that are inside of your brain, and clearly it's not. And I will tell you that there's, with social media and things today, there's just so much negativity out there, and it's being put in front of our faces on purpose. And I think that's extremely important that people start doing that mental audit on themselves almost on a daily basis. And I think if they did that, it would probably, they would probably see themselves consuming a lot less of the negative stuff. And I know there's a lot of apps and things that are out there now that will actually like lock yourself from not being able to get into certain social media applications and stuff for that reason, right? So people can get through their workday and not be consumed with all this negative distractions that are out there.
Well, what I tell people is you don't know how good you could feel until you start feeling good. And what I mean by that is something like a mental diet audit. You don't realize how much negativity is affecting you until you actually consciously become aware of it. And then once you start practicing this 8-to-1 ratio of positivity to negativity, you start like realizing how powerful this principle is. And you start realizing like, man, I actually do love my wife a lot more. I actually am making more money in business. My kids are actually happier now. I'm able to show them more love, and I'm able to communicate better with the people I work with. You start seeing all the positive effects of a healthy mental diet, and only then does it really sink in how powerful this really is.
That's interesting. All right, so let's wrap things up by, I want you to speak on Hero a little bit. What is Hero? What's it mean to you? Obviously, a lot of the pictures and stuff that we'll be showing later have you have it plastered everywhere. So tell us a little bit about Hero.
For me, this was one of the things that saved me. I love a really book that I love is Joseph Campbell, A Hero with 1,000 Faces. And what it does, it kind of teaches the archetype of the hero's journey. And I love the hero's journey because, look, if you've watched any movie that's an action-adventure movie ever, Star Wars, all the Marvel movies, they all follow this hero's journey. And the reason I love it so much is it shows us kind of where we're at in life, but also that we have the ability to create our own hero's journey. And, so much of what I coach and what I teach about is you're literally writing the story to your life. You're creating the movie of your life. You're choosing your supporting cast, right? The people you surround yourself with. You're choosing the soundtrack to your life with the podcast that you listen to or the music you listen to, your mental diet. You're literally choosing everything in your movie. And if you just step back from life and look at it as I am the conscious creator of my own story, my own movie, you get this sense of power and you get this sense of I really am in control. I'm not a victim. Like, I'm holding the pen in my hand to literally write my own story. And that's why I refer to the hero's journey so much, and I call myself a hero because I am the hero of my own story. And I have to look at my life like that, and it helps me put things in perspective. Like, what would the hero version of myself do right now? If I'm the main character in my movie, what would that main character do right now? And to me, it's a very, very empowering thought because it gives us our power back and it takes it away from all those other variables and environments and circumstances that we often can fall victim to.
All right, so that leads to the hot seat question. So if Robby could be any superhero, who would he be?
So it's funny. Because I love the hero's journey so much, I have little action figures on my freaking desk to remind me. And this one actually, this moment in Endgame, Marvel's Endgame, where Captain America gets Thor's hammer, it literally gave me chills when I saw that moment in that movie. Because here's why. That moment I love so much because at that point Cap learned how powerful he really was. He really stepped into his power and he realized I am worthy. And because you got to remember, like, only the worthy can pick up the hammer. It's, actually have the hammer on my desk too.
Nice.
As just a reminder of, like, I am worthy. Like, I am worthy to have everything that I want if I step into it and if I actually believe it.
All right, two final things. One, if there's one book right now, somebody that they're struggling, they're wanting to make some major changes in their life, what book would you tell them to pick up, start reading?
Oh, man, so many. But I think really pivotal for any transformation in life is Mindset by Carol Dweck. Because if you don't have, like, she's actually one that coined the term growth mindset. If you don't have that growth mindset, it's really hard to put in the practice of any other books that you're going to read. If you don't believe that you're capable of change, then you're, no matter what you read, no matter what you try to do, it's not going to be successful, because you have to have that belief first. Actually, in psychology, it's called the HOPE model of change, and the H actually stands for hope, and it stands for I believe I have a brighter future.
I love it. All right, great tip. All right, last thing. This is going to be for the ladies in the home service space here. So you're clearly wearing a lot more clothes than what you were in our first interview last week. So, can you get by just like a little glimpse of what Robby looks like today, as far as what you've been able to make for this transformation? A little flex or something. Let's give them something to sign off on.
Well, you've got plenty of pictures that I sent you and show them. But yeah, I mean, we're working on it, man. We're in bulking season right now. We're trying to add some muscle because I do plan on competing next year. And one of my personal goals is I want to be able to call myself a professional bodybuilder. So it's going to be a hell of a goal that we're going to try to achieve in this next year.
That's awesome. Man, I cannot thank you enough. Look, I've been following you and your journey for several years. You and I were never extremely close. You were a little bit younger than me. Like you'd mentioned that your brother and I played high school golf, not at the same high school, actually on the other side of the Gulf Coast area. But I knew that you would be able to give back to our listeners from a headspace and just a mental ninja is what the stuff I see you put out, and the passion that I see you have for helping people. And clearly everyone can understand where that passion comes from, because you struggled, you contemplated not even being here on this earth anymore, and then clearly you saw that you had a lot to give back. And I think everybody can agree that you do, and I appreciate your time today. I look forward to having you back on the show soon, and thank you, and good luck on the journey and the rest of the things that you got in your future, man.
Man, I really appreciate that, JB. It's been a pleasure talking to you today. I do get fired up and I do get passionate about this because, yes, I've lived it. I've totally seen my life change, my circumstances in my life change. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to do the things that I've done in my life now if it wasn't for the things that I've been through in my past, and then having to have that post-traumatic growth afterwards. So, man, look, just one final note, guys. It's a beautiful life out there. And that beauty is totally dependent on what you decide to create it to be. And you have that power. Just don't stop fighting. Don't quit. And just enjoy life, because that's what it's all about. Love on people, serve people, and just try to help as many people as possible. So if people want to reach you, what's the best way for them to reach out and find you? Website, email? What you got? So, look, I'm on all the socials at Robby D'Angelo. That's honestly the best place to reach me. My email is robby@robbydangelo.com. And I have, look, guys, if this information kind of intrigues you and you like this type of information, go to joinoperationabundance.com. That is my free Facebook group where I do a 20-minute mental mindset call every Tuesday. There's also a podcast and business coaching in there. So it's a ton of free resources, but that's joinoperationabundance.com. Man, I appreciate it, man. This has been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to having you back soon. Absolutely, brother. Thank you, man. All right, man. Thank you.